Josh.
And I'm Sam. Welcome back to the podcast, where we're discussing the A New Hope from a Certain Point of View book.
Sorry, we probably should have found our place before we started recording. It had all happened decades ago, and Jeff was still rich. Very rich, or he wouldn't have been allowed entry to this room at all. But there had to be a twinge when he thought about what had been taken from his family. Frustration expressed in a spray of viridian across the gill-like fronds on his neck. Okay, what color is viridian again? I'm going to have to look that up. The infuriating thing about Click-Clack was that having a high card wasn't always good and low wasn't always bad. Lando's card was precisely in the middle of the deck. He couldn't even use the odds to help him. But that didn't matter, really. In Click-Clack, the cards were in many ways irrelevant. The game was about coming to a complete and thorough understanding of another being in the space of a single conversation, and if you couldn't manage that, you were lost. Okay, to me, that sounds exceedingly dumb, but, maybe that's just the autism talking. But Lando was not lost. He had Jeff dead to rights. He'd pieced together that little flush of green meant frustration. And he'd also seen it whenever he'd slipped references to things being high or tall or above into the conversation. Little signifiers meant to be perceived by Jeff as accidental. Subconscious nudges to help him think Lando's card was on the high side. Every time he did it, another green flush, which meant Jeff was annoyed, which meant Jeff's card had to be high too, because it was hard for him to decide whether Lando's high card was higher than his high card. Put all that together, and Lando's bet was easy. Low. Shall we? Lando said, gesturing toward the buttons on the table surface, hidden from the other player by a small screen, which were used to indicate the high/low bet. Jeff nodded politely and moved one of his appendages behind his own screen. Lando kept his smile smooth and his breathing steady. No external signals for Jeff to read, but inside he was already laughing.
Lando's cheating. He's cheating. Look in his pocket. Look in his sleeve. There is a skifter.
Always got to keep an eye out for those, but you do realize, Sam, that they're not playing Sabak.
Oh. Well, whatever he's playing, he's still cheating.
Shall we? Lando said, gesturing toward the buttons on the table surface hidden from the other player by a small screen, which were used to indicate the high/low bet. Jeff nodded politely and moved one of his appendages behind his own screen. Lando kept his smile smooth and his breathing steady. No external signals for Jeff to read, but inside he was already laughing. This was it. At last, with the credits he was about to win, he could pay off his more pressing debts, put some money down on a ship, get mobile again, see what sort of delights the galaxy had to offer. A man of Lando Calrissian's unique abilities and sensibilities. Wait, I just realized. This means that in the Disney canon, at the time the Death Star blew up, Lando didn't even own Cloud City yet. Wow. Only the owner of that place for a few years before he lost it. Such a shame. He touched the button on the table, caressed it, savoring the moment. And then, a shout, a command uttered in the gravelly, compressed, inhuman tone that anyone living in the Empire's galaxy recognized immediately. Hands in clear view. Anyone who moves will be shot. There will be no second warning, the stormtrooper said. The room froze as everyone slowly turned to look at the squad of Imperial troops that had entered the little space. 5 ordinary troops, plus an old Poltron sergeant, but also someone unusually a black-clad Imperial officer. Oh, okay, so the orange Poltrons means sergeants. Got it. Lando thought it was a lieutenant, but he couldn't be sure. He never bothered to memorize the rank insignia.
Well, actually, in the Imperial Handbook, there's a Stormtrooper Officer Captain Duty Uniform, which is an Imperial Captain. Stormtrooper Officer Orange Pauldron, which is Stormtrooper Officer. Then there's Stormtrooper Officer Squad Leader, which is a stormtrooper with blue markings.
Oh, that explains the Force Unleashed. The Calrissian policy with respect to Imperial officers was the same top to bottom. Avoid. The officer's face was cold, icy, clenched tight. Read to Lando like barely restrained rage, anger at some great personal injury. This is an illegal gambling establishment in violation of Imperial Statute 759.8. You are all ordered to vacate the premises immediately. Any credits you have deposited with the room's cashier are forfeit. A rumble of discontent rippled through the room, and everyone had money stashed with the cashier in exchange for the credit sheets they used to gamble. Lando himself, in particular, had the very large wager he had placed on the Click-Clack game. Thousands of credits, carefully amassed over long nights at gambling tables much less reputable than this one, scraped together from gigs that were so far beneath his talents that it almost physically hurt to take them, out to evaporate like smoke. Movement in the crowd as a large robed gentleman stepped forward, rings on his fingers glittering in the low light, heavy jowls lifting to lavish a generous smile on the presumed lieutenant, Lady Luck Friedel, owner of the casino, Friedel, and a man with potentially more to lose that evening than any gambler in his establishment. My friend, and is there a mistake? Friedel said. Everything here is legal. People are just having a nice evening. Not anymore. This is over, the officer said.
I just thought about this. Lando's losing Spock game and says to one Spock player, "Hey, look at that! Your long-lost wife is here." Spock player says, "My wife! Oh, finally! We get to be reunited after all these years." Wait a minute, my wife died years ago. Hey, where'd he go?
Okay, that's good. My friend, is there a mistake? Friedel said. Everything here is legal. People are just having a nice evening. Not anymore. This is over. The officer said, his tone colder than the dark side of an ice moon. The smile on Friedel's face wavered just a touch. Oh, no, man, Lando thought. Don't do it. Don't you see? The man's just looking for an excuse. But Friedel apparently...
It's over? Oh, come on. Just one more round, friend.
Okay, guys, new drinking game. Every time Sam references the holiday special, take a shot. I'm kidding. Unless it's a shot of water. You might be able to survive then. But Friedel apparently did not see or decided the risk was worth it, in the desperate hope that this obvious misunderstanding could be cleared up. That there was a way to salvage his reputation and his business before word spread clear that Lady Luck Friedel couldn't keep his illegal gambling den clear of Imperials. Friedel leaned in closer to the Imperial officer and uttered a few low words. Lando couldn't hear them, but he had a pretty good idea of what was being said. Hey man, I'm paid up this month. What the hell are you doing? Don't we have an arrangement? I'm shocked to hear that gambling is going on in this establishment. You're winning, sir. Oh man, nobody is going to get that joke. Absolutely no one. Lando saw the officer's face turn even colder, which he would have said was impossible. He saw Friedel pressing his case, saw the troopers taking a tighter grip on their rifles. Saw it all, and he knew exactly what was about to happen. Lando had a blaster under his cape at the small of his back. Just a little thing, but it packed a wallop. He was better with it than anyone in this casino knew, than anyone alive knew. In fact, he could take out the lieutenant, the stormtrooper commander, maybe even one of the underlings before they reacted. And by the time they did, some of the other illicit weaponry in the room would be out from under cloaks and hidden holsters. These idiot Imperials had no idea how numbered they actually were in here. They'd all be gunned down in no time. Someone just had to make the first move. Someone had to play hero. Lando Calrissian loved heroes. They thought the galaxy owed them something, like they mattered somehow in some bizarre way that meant the fundamental rules of reality were tilted in their favor. Heroes honestly believed, that things would just work out for them. Heroes were Lando's favorite opponents at the gambling table. The worse the odds got, the bigger they bet. Because heroes were suckers. Cough. Battle of Tanab. Cough. Lando slowly, carefully moved his hands up above the edge of the click-clack table. They were empty. The Imperial officer nodded once, tightly. 2 quick shots from a blaster rifle, and then a thud as Luck Friedel hit the floor. A smoking hole where his heart had been. Lando would have to find his next game somewhere else. The lieutenant looked out at the room. The murder he just ordered appeared to have done exactly to zero to cool the rage seething behind his eyes. Disperse, he said. Lando's eyes shifted to the safe across the room where Fredo kept the wagers on the various games until they were paid out. Millions of credits in that safe, many of which had, just minutes ago, belonged to Lando Calrissian. Lando closed his eyes for a moment, sighed deeply, then dispersed. You know, the funny thing is, if Lando had started a firefight and the Imperials had all been killed, then guess what? He would have been able to get that money back. So much for heroes or suckers. Another bar across the city in a less desirable zone. The sort of place Lando had sincerely hoped he would never have to set foot in again. A place where work could be found for individuals with unique abilities, sensibilities, and moralities. Work had suddenly become very important. Lando needed a gig to make up those credits he just lost. Quick, or he'd be in trouble. More trouble. So much for help, he thought, stepping through the door, immediately suffused by the miasma of spilled drinks and dead dreams that places like this always shared. Lando walked to the bar, sensing the eyes of almost every being in the place watching him. He owed debts to at least half of them, ranging from credits to blood. He reached the bar, then turned around and smiled. "Hey guys, long time," he said. "How about a round on me?" The bartender, of a species with arguably too many eyes, tapped Lando's shoulder. "You buying around for the bar? How you gonna pay for it, Calrissian?" he said. "Put it on my tab, Uncle," Lando said, not turning. "Your tab? Your tab?" Uncle said, his tone rising into an aggrieved line that could pierce steel. "You honestly think there's credit for you in this bar after..." Okay, people who do actually go to bars, is the tab thing real? Or is that just something that happens on TV shows? I am genuinely curious. Lando pulled a credit chip from his pocket and placed it down on the bar, doing it theatrically, making sure plenty of people saw him do it. "That should handle it. Everything I owe you, and the round for the house." Uncle's attitude mellowed considerably after that, and more important, it meant Lando was safe, at least for the time it took for the bar's patrons to obtain and consume their drinks. You don't shoot the guy buying the booze. Usually. Lando moved toward the end of the bar where a man sat reading from a data pad. Lando joined the man, lifting his glass to his mouth. "Nice gesture," Lobot said. "So, you won?" Okay, this is a little inconsistent with the comics, because how does Lobot have his emotions back? Lando drained his drink. A barely drinkable local brandy, but what could you expect, really? And set the glass down on the bar, signaling to Akal to bring him another. "I'm gonna need you to cover this next one, Lo, and all of the many others I plan to consume this fine evening. Those were my last few credits. Your man Lando is officially skinned." Lobot's mouth tightened in an all too familiar note of resignation. "I told you that click-clack game was a bad idea. Too hard to calculate the odds, too messy. It wasn't the game. I had the game. A bunch of Imperials busted in, killed Fredo, ran us all out of there. Technically I didn't lose, let's be clear about that, but they confiscated my buy-in. Lost my credits, kept my skin. The Lando Calrissian story, just like always." Lobot raised an eyebrow, the metal implants on either side of his bald head flashing rapidly as he processed this new information. "You're kidding," he said. "Fredo paid up every month right on time. It was a point of pride with him. He ran the cleanest illegal backroom casino in the city. That's why he could bring in the big fish. And also the smaller fish." Lobot lifted his own glass. Water, of course. Lobot never drank or consumed anything that might cloud his thoughts, for fear it might allow his Imperial issue implants the window they needed to finally take over his mind. Okay, so the comic happens after this. Sorry for the confusion. The things were useful, especially when it came to gambling and calculating odds. They extracted a price, no doubt about it. He tilted his glass toward Lando in a mock toast. "Such as you." Lando ignored the comments and took a sip from his fresh drink. The bartender was hovering, waiting to see if new credits were forthcoming, and Lando waved him away with a little shooing motion. "The Imperials were riled up," Lando said once Akal was out of earshot. "Furious, even. And it wasn't just stormtroopers. They had a ranking officer with them, too. Don't know what happened, but I do," Lando said. "They're trying to assert their authority. Get a little pride back." Pride? What the hell are you talking about? Lobot called out to the bartender. "Akal, can you run that feed again?" The bartender nodded amiably and reached for a control stick for the large horror screen mounted above the bar. "Sure," Akal said. "You know, I've watched that thing 10 times and I'm still not sick of it." Okay, so for anyone out there who wants to run a galactic regime someday, my best advice to you is try to create one that isn't so horrible that people are cheering when millions of your people get killed. Just saying. Grainy footage appeared on the screen, sharpening up after a few initial bits of static. It looked like it was shot from the point of view of a starfighter, something long-nosed zipping through space. "What is this?" Lando asked. Yes, the rebellion just leaked it on the darknet. It's getting play all over the place. Not another one of their propaganda clips? I'd wish they'd give it a rest. The more they shout about their stupid cause, the less interesting it gets. That's just basic psychology. You'd think they'd figure that out. Just watch, Lobot said, his voice quiet and his eyes focused on the holo screen. So Lando watched. It was footage of a space battle. A bunch of X-Wings and a few other fighters of various models, all of them looking like they should have been scrapped years ago, deploying against the biggest space station he'd ever seen. A huge gray spear, almost like a miniature moon bristling with turbolaser defense turrets. What is that thing? He asked. They call it the Death Star. There is no better name. Lobot answered. Planet killer, if you believe the rumors. They blew up Alderaan. Lando watched the fighters make their attack runs, watched the X-Wings being picked off by the endless swarm of TIE fighters, watched a bunch of heroes die the way heroes always died. Suckers, one and all. Why would they release this? Lando said, taking another slug of the increasingly drinkable brandy. Do they want us to feel sorry for them? Who's to say this is even real footage? Both sides put out these propaganda pieces all the time, and then Lando knew it was real, because another ship had appeared on the screen. A very, very familiar ship. A Calrissian YT-1300 light freighter. Old, sure, maybe a little banged up here and there, but still beautiful. She was still beautiful. That's my ship, he said, rising out of his seat a bit. That's the Millennium Falcon. Okay, by the way, Mom, if you're watching this, remind me to read you the Millennium Falcon novel sometime. But what I was going to say... How does he recognize it? Don't all YT-1300 look the same?
If you own a ship for a long time, you'll probably recognize it, even though it looks like any other ship.
Yeah, it's a good explanation as any. He watched, stunned, his drink halfway to his mouth as the Falcon swooped in from out of frame behind a trio of TIEs. One a little modified, maybe a custom job. They were Side our fleet system's pride and joy, the advanced X-1. They were trailing some X-Wings running through some kind of trench on the Death Star's surface. Also, by the way, ships that should have been scrapped years ago, X-Wings are brand new at this point in the timeline. Its quad lasers fired, and it picked them off, vaporizing two and sending the last one, the custom, spiraling away into space. The ship, his ship, pulled up and flew away, out of frame. Lando felt more than sensed everyone in the bar leaning forward, as if they were waiting for something to happen. Wait, can you run that back for a second? Akko paused the feed to a few groans from around the room and looked at Lando incredulously. This is nothing, Calrissian. The best part's coming up. Come on, just run it back for me. Lando gave his best smile, the very best one, the one he reserved for extremely special occasions. The smile that promised whatever the recipient might want or need. Credits, friendship, protection, short-term or long-term love, the wonders of the galaxy itself. If only they would do what the owner of the smile wanted. The Calrissian Special. You know, this is where I'd make a joke about Flynn Rider, but does anyone remember Tangled other than me? Okay, moving on. The bartender shook his head but rewound the footage. Of course he did. Stop, Lando said. Right there. He watched it again. The Millennium Falcon saving the day, then zooming up and away. Again, he said. Akko didn't even protest this time, just ran it back. Lando had been sure the first time he'd watched it, but needed the next two playthroughs to process what he'd seen. But there was no doubt in his mind. The tactics, the maneuvers, he'd seen it all before. No one flew the Falcon as well as Lando Calrissian, but one man came as close as anyone could. Han Solo is flying that ship. He said. Looks like, Lobot said. But that is impossible, Lando said. He was dimly aware of the footage continuing, of an enormous explosion of cheers in the bar, cheers that would probably get everyone in here killed if there were any Imperials within earshot, but he wasn't really paying attention. What was Han Solo doing with the rebellion, and not just, say, smuggling for them? That'd be fine, sure. A gig was a gig, and fuel wasn't free, but this, Han was attacking an Imperial superweapon. It just didn't make sense. Well, he won, so... Lando knew a lot of people all across the galaxy. It was sort of his trademark, but very, very few people knew him. He could count them on one hand. Lobot, maybe a few others, and Han Solo. He'd have said that was mutual. He'd have said they were the same, morally speaking, more than anyone else in the galaxy. They were out for themselves because no one else was. And then this Death Star thing. Now, Lando could understand helping people out from time to time. That made sense. Never know when you might need to call in a favor. But this was lunacy. It was like doubling your bet in Sabak when the other guy had the idiots array. Is that a Rebels reference? Mm-hmm. It was like kicking a sleeping Rancor. It wasn't just pushing your luck, it was shoving it off a cliff and laughing while it hit every rock on the way down. The rebellion was a lost cause. The rebels were heroes with all of that implied. They were doomed because the Empire was the House, and the House always wins. Yeah, not in this galaxy. And yet, there was the Millennium Falcon, his ship, right in the thick of one of the ugliest battles he'd ever seen. Lando would have bet every credit he used to have, that Han Solo was neither a hero or susceptible to the sort of nonsense ideologies heroes subscribe to. But there he was, heroing it up. Troubling. Lando stared moodily up at the screen. The bartender had started the clip over, and he watched the heroes start their impossible attack over it once again. He tried to understand and couldn't. He couldn't see the angle in it. Why would Han do this? Lando turned to look at the bar and lifted his glass. To the memory of the greatest smuggler I ever knew, he shouted, to some half-hearted cheers from the other patrons. He looked back at Lobot and pointed at the screen where Han Solo was once again risking Lando's ship. His precious, beautiful Millennium Falcon, for no reason he could figure. If I ever do anything like that, shoot me. No problem, Lobot said. Okay, Lando, you've just blown up the second Death Star. Don't go back to Cloud City. Lobot is waiting. You know what he'll do. As Lando watched the Death Star explode, he considered the one rule of confidence men and gamblers and scam artists the galaxy over. If you can't see the angle, it means you're the one being played. You are, in fact, the sucker. Lando sat and thought and drank drinks he had no money to pay for and wondered what he was missing. If you can't see the angle, it means you're the one being played. You know, if I put that in a Discord server or something, it would probably cause a flame war over what it really means and how people interpret it. But moving on. By Whatever Son by E.K. Johnston. Story by E.K. Johnston and Ashley Eckstein. This is the one about Ahsoka's not girlfriend. Miara Larte breathed in and remembered how much she loved real air. Sure, a large part of her heart was in the skies and the void of space beyond it, trained in an A-wing cockpit before transitioning to an X-wing and eventually a cruiser, but nothing recycled through a ship's O2 scruggers can match good green air planetside. Even now, in the wake of battle and horror, 1 or 2 deep rips was enough to steady her. Okay, sci-fi always does that, where recycled air is just not the same as, like, air on planets, and someday I want to talk to an astronaut just to find out if that's true. It's now really the best time for this. Jessamine was red-eyed, but her voice was clear and Miara couldn't smell any alcohol on her. Her second-in-command was a professional to the end, it seemed. They have to do something, murmured one of the new gunners. Gunners Hester or Piattons or something like that. He'd been assigned to Miara recently. Like her, he had been away from Alderaan when the Death Star attacked. Unlike her, he hadn't been with his shipmates at the time. Behind them, rank after rank of rebel soldiers filed into lines. Miara and her Alderaanian crew had a place of privilege up the front, but that meant they had the longest wait while the room filled up. It was the first time they'd had to stand around and do nothing. So she expected someone to crack. It's just so Jessamine trailed off. Miara reached across the prescribed space between them and took her hand. I know, she said. There's nothing anyone can say. We've lost too much for that. But this reminds us that we didn't lose everything. Jessamine was quiet. Miara wondered if she'd said the right thing. As a captain, she was sure of it, but she hadn't been born on Alderaan. Sometimes those who had been took it personally when she claimed the planet as her own. It was bad enough when the planet still existed. Miara imagined that now her grief might seem like a fresh insult, but Jessamine only nodded and drew herself up to attention. You know, maybe it wasn't the best idea for the rebellion to put all of their refugees on the same planet. They didn't speak any further, but Miara could feel her crew all around her, and knew that they could hold it together just a bit longer. At last, the great cavern at the rebel base on Yavin 4 was being crammed full, though the orderly lines of uniformed troops belied the crush. Miara forgot sometimes how big the rebellion was. Their losses in the past few weeks had been near catastrophic, and yet there she stood, knees locked at parade rest, hands behind your back, shoulder to shoulder with what remained of the Alderaanian Guard. So yeah, in case you're watching the movie and are curious who those guys are, now you know. What remained? Miara felt herself drift toward memory and pulled back sharply. She could get away with fidgeting in the crowd, the twisting of her fingers hidden against the palm of her hand, and the shifting of her weight concealed by her already bent legs. But this was not the moment for her grief. The rebellion was quick and tireless, moving from mission to mission with very little downtime, yet every now and then a yawning pause would appear. Miara knew they were on the edge of one right now. This was not the first time she had lost a planet, but they were not there, not yet. Lost a planet didn't quite cover it. Miara could go back to Rana if she wanted, see it from orbit, walk the dead fields, and go to the caves, where Nira had saved her life with a stun blast. There was nothing left of Rada but the planet itself. There was nothing left of Alderaan but dust and memory, and what survivors remained spread out across the stars. Do it to Tatooine next!
That's what everyone wants.
We all know they won't. If they weren't brave enough to do it to Coruscant, they're not going to do it to Tatooine. And without turning her head, she looked sideways down the line of her crew. Crew. Once that word had meant family and farming. As a pilot and later an officer, Miara felt it meant a team and a job to do in all the mess. Her people looked good, which was what she'd expected. Every line of their uniforms was crisp and their helmets gleamed. In the bright side of the Avonfort morning, no bleariness or signs of unprofessionalism remained, despite the fact that many of them had been up late the previous night. The colony here welcomed refugees from any world salvaged by the Empire. Places like Fest... Andor... Rada, Jeddah, and now Alderaan. There was no shortage of understanding, no shortage of means by which to remember the names beyond counting, and a world that was no longer a world at all. Antilles who had scooped them up, Organa who had given them a home, Organa who had given them a mission, Organa who stood here before them now and had given them hope. Y'all better not make any oregano jokes. All eyes were drawn to Leia, even through the ranks of rebels turned to face each other. Her small form, clad in a pristinely white dress, was impossible to miss against the unrelieved gray of the cavern walls. More than that, she was compelling in the way her mother had been, and gentle in the manner of her father, and even the most disciplined of gazes shifted to her, in orbit around a star. Miara had heard the whispers. Ice princess, cold. Nah, Leia burns hot. Hot as Anakin did. But she could find no fault in how Leia chose to carry herself. The rebellion had demanded nearly everything of the princess. She wanted to keep her grief private. Miara was not about to criticize. Miara's own grief bubbled up again at the thought of what the princess had lost, and again, as Leia must be doing in full view of all those assembled, she forced it back down. Soon, but not yet. Home had always been a place that Kate had made. On Rada, her sister had kept them fed and clothed by sheer force of will. On Alderaan, even in the first refugee camp, it had been easier. This felt like a betrayal, though Miara could not have said of him, and it drove Kate into restlessness and eventually to a medical program in one of Alderaan's over-pretty cities. She served on a Republic medical frigate, and the sisters didn't get to see each other very often. Wait, Republic? I assume that's just a typo by the author. Like how Deidre was raised in an Imperial kinderblock, even though she's way too old to have been a child when the Empire first rose. But moving on. At least Kaden was alive. Miara's path to the stars had been more direct. The A-Wing pilots who had flown in Rada's skies as the moon was evacuated had been high on adrenaline when Miara found them. 14, and despite the carnage she'd witnessed, fearless now that she was in the sky. And they had told her all kinds of stories on the way back to Alderaan. By the time they'd landed, Miara was certain she was going to fly again, but next time with her own hands at the controls. The rebellion had been in dire needs of pilot. Oh wait, Kaden is Ahsoka's non-girlfriend. I always get them mixed up. I need to reread the Ahsoka novel. Even if between Clone Wars Season 7 and Tales of the Jedi, it's basically non-canon at this point, just like the Bad Batch retcons the canon comics. You were saying?
It's basically Legends. Ahsoka novel, welcome to Legends.
Sort of like how the Clone Wars in general is an honorary part of the Disney canon at this point. And they had told her all kinds of stories on the way back to Alderaan. But the next time they had landed, Miara was certain she was going to fly again, but next time with her own hands on the controls. The rebellion had been in dire need of pilots, so trading had been easy to come by. We are actual children, and they are letting us fly fighters. That's how desperate the situation is.
Yeah. About that. What about the Jedi? They turn their own children and younglings into child soldiers.
Even the Sith don't do that. Most of the time. Miara had risen through the ranks thanks to her own quick thinking and the prodigious death rate pilots faced in the early days, before the various rebel cells had coalesced into something more stable. Evil. Her promotion to captain had come at the request of Senator Organa himself, though Queen Brea had been the one to formalize it in a ceremony in the capital where several other promotions had been handed out. It was the first time Miara had seen the princess up close. At 10, Leia was tiny and filled with dignified fury, a seemingly perfect mix of the Senator and Queen both. Wow, that actually matches up perfectly with the Obi-Wan show. Miara had been young for a promotion, but she had understood why she received the honor the moment her first classified mission had come in. There was no mistaking the fulcrum symbol attached to it. Okay, so which fulcrum do you think this was?
Well, I don't know.
My vote's on Cassian.
Alright, I'll take that bet. My vote's on Callus.
I mean, odds are the author had intended for it to be Ahsoka, but Cassian would just make sense according to the timeline. I just think Callus wasn't fulcrum for long enough for that. Moving on. She'd have to tell Kaden in person, words chosen carefully to avoid compromising a valuable secret. They would need more pilots again now. So many had died at Scarif and in the battle against the Death Star. Imperial defectors were already showing up, or awoken by the carnage the Empire's now destroyed superweapon had wreaked. Yes, there would be bodies for cockpits, hands for the controls, souls to stretch the limits of speed and agility, bending X-Wing to will. Music sounded from somewhere, a horn pulling Miara out of memory, and musing and back to the cavern with the rest of her crew. She heard Jessamyn's breath catch as she recognized the song. Another piece of Alderaan the Empire had not ruined. Okay, so here's the funny thing. Remember that the Star Wars medal ceremony scene without the music YouTube videos? Yeah, canonically the music was playing in universe, so there's that. It was against protocol and awkward, given that Jessamyn was currently standing behind her, but Miara reached back to her second in command again. For a brief moment, Jessamyn's fingers grasped hers, and then Miara returned to attention. If it made Skywalker or Solo nervous to walk the entire length of the cavern with the eyes of the rebellion on them, they didn't show it. Miara assumed the Wookiee was fine. She hadn't met Solo at all, but had only heard what he'd done after the fact. She had been in the briefing when Skywalker had spoken up. He had made her feel old, made her think of a girl on a little moon, building bombs because she could, eager to fight in a battle she didn't yet understand the true scope of. That was the difference the rebellion made. It had taken that girl and trained her, made her better, and given her the tools she needed to survive. She had passed along as much of what she knew as she could. To her crew, to the other pilots, to the not quite random idealists she'd ferried about the galaxy on those missions she wasn't supposed to talk about. She'd been alone, in the end, on Rada, and she'd been out of materials to explode. But she wasn't alone anymore. Neither was Skywalker, though she had no idea what he would become as a result of it. The word Jedi comes to mind. The trio passed in front of her and climbed the stairs to stand before Leia and what remained of the Alliance High Command. Except Mon Mothma. She's, doing who knows where with who knows what. As one, the rebel was on the floor of the cavern turret, facing front toward the princess. The music grew quiet as Skywalker and Solo bowed to receive the medals the princess hung about their necks. Miara could tell by the way Leia's mouth twitched that Solo must have pulled a face at her, but the princess remained cool under the scrutiny of hundreds. The light gleamed off her necklace, a traditional Alderaanian piece, Miara was sure. She wondered who had gotten it off the planet and how it had found its way to Yavin 4. There was a shuffle on the platform as a little astromech unit pushed its way forward to stand beside the princess's gleaming prodigal droid. It chirruped, oddly cheerful for a droid, Miara thought. And just as the music swelled again, so only those at the very front of the cavern heard it. Everyone could see Skywalker laughing, though as he, Solo, and the Wookiee turned around to face the crowd, the Wookiee cheered as Wookiee roared as cheering broke out. And Miara took another look to her side and saw tears streaming down Jessamyn's face.
Hey, why's the Wookiee cheering? He didn't get a medal.
Okay, come on, that joke's been done to death at this point. Her second-in-command looked at her long enough for a quick nod. This was why it had to be now, why they had to stand in this place on this planet, and celebrate what they had while remembering what they had lost. Aggressively plays Rebel Let's Go. It was for the balance of it, the good measured out to offset the bad, but neither of them forgotten or erased. When Miara looked back to the platform, Leia was smiling, her face radiant as she stood at the center of attention. It wasn't a political smile. Miara had seen enough of those to know them. It was real. Miara felt something in her own chest unclench, freeing the emotions she'd been holding back since Alderaan disappeared in a blaze of fire, unsure if she was entitled to feel them. Rada was gone. Alderaan was gone. Her sister lived. She lived. She had her crew and her ship, and soon she would have a mission again. She stood on Yavin 4 and breathed green air. With grief on her cheeks and hope in her heart, Miara Larte added her voice to those in the cavern who celebrated the living and remembered the dead. It would be a long night, she knew. She had lived long nights before. But in the morning, by whatever sun, she would get up and she would rebel. Wills by Tom Engelberger. At last, it is time. I have heard every version of the story, viewed every holocron, and studied every artifact. Well, he's just like me. A lifetime of preparation has readied me for this noble duty. May the Force be with me as I begin the sacred task of writing in the Journal of the Wills. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, the Old Republic was the Republic of legend, greater than distance or time.
Yes, it was.
We gotta get a hold of the original 1976 novelization of A New Hope. That thing's gold. Like, it's terrible, but it's gold. A long time. What do you. Well, I mean, it's not really that far away, is it? What are you talking about? Far, far away? I'm saying it's far, but not far, far. The Wills live on Peridia. I mean, if anything, I'd say it's a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away. Yeah, well, the rest of the Wills asked me to write this, not you. So it's going to say a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is a period of civil war. A period? Wow, you really like to keep things vague, don't you? Good grief, what do you want me to put? It is a Thursday afternoon of civil war? No, that's kind of stupid. Maybe the problem is that passive voice. It is a kind of weak. You should start with an action verb. Like war with an exclamation point. It's the first sentence, dude. If you nitpick every single sentence of this journal, we aren't even going to get to the battles. Alright, fine, keep it. Could be better, but... Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. Whoa, 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 the Empire and the Rebels? Yeah. Already? What about the Republic? What about it? You're just going to skip over the Republic? Don't tell me you're skipping the Clone Wars and all that stuff. Well, yeah. What about Anakin and Padme and the Saiya dads? I figured I could just sort of make some mysterious references to all that. Okay, it's hard to make jokes about this because it itself is already a joke. Mysterious references? What about Darth Maul? He's just going to be a mysterious reference? Actually, I'm not sure. I wasn't really planning on mentioning him. Not mention Darth Maul? Darth Maul? No. Next, you're going to tell me that you weren't planning to mention Captain Rex, Ahsoka, Ventress, Cad Bane, Savage Opress, Jar Jar, and the Mandalorians. It's just a Zoomer Star Wars fan meeting a Gen X Star Wars fan. Well, I guess I could always go back and tell their stories later. Out of order? That's just going to confuse everybody. I think they'll figure it out. Right. Wait, I know. Maybe you could add numbers to the beginning of each part. You know, like maybe this one starts out a long time ago in a galaxy far away, episode 4. That seems kinda... Oh, I got an idea. What if you make it IV? That would be fantastic. You could give each level a title. Like, episode VII Blue Harvest. Well, that's just weird, but if I promise to call it episode IV and think of a great title, will you let me get on with this? Yeah, cool, keep going. You're about to get to the good stuff. Chin Ursa, Orson Credit, K2SO. During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans of the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Wait, that was it? What about Ursa? What about K2SO? I'm planning to start with R2-D2 and C-3PO. Okay, now you're just being crazy. You're going to skip over K2SO, the best droid ever. Hey! HK-47 would like to know your address.
HK-47 would like to know your address.
And start with a prodigal droid? What the hut, dude? And this is where the more annoying parts of the fan base start saying, what the hut? People in Star Wars don't talk like that. Look, I read Origami Yoda growing up, and this is a love letter to that. So, please, just stop talking just for a small amount of time. I mean, R2, yes, he's awesome, but if you're going to skip anybody, you should skip C-3PO. All he does is whine. Wow, really is a Zoomer Star Wars fan. I can't skip him, he's really important on Endor. Andor, wait a minute, you're not putting in the teddy bears, are you? They're not teddy bears. The Ewoks are fierce warriors, the top of the food chain on a savage planet. Well, okay, first of all, they live on a moon, not a planet. Second of all, look, just save it. Okay, gonna be honest, I would much rather read a short story about these two arguing about the Ewoks. They're not going in this episode anyway. Well, what is in this episode? You're skipping everything. Well, Princess Leia will be in it if you ever let me get started. Okay, cool, good, she's awesome. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, Custodian? Seriously? People are going to think this is a movie about a janitor. Wait, what do they mean by movie? Do the Wills make movies based on what for them is in universe history? I know this whole story is just an excuse for a bunch of meta jokes, but as a world-building and lore nerd, I have many questions. Oh my Jabba, you are driving me nuts. Do you have to nitpick every single word? Just constructive criticism. Can you even take a little constructive criticism? I mean, if you can't take constructive criticism, maybe you're not the best wolf for the job. Oh, I guess you think you can do better? Honestly, yes I do. Oh my god, it's turned into a fanfiction website comment section. Then why don't you go write your own journal and leave me alone? Okay, fine, you know what? I will. I've got some great ideas for an episode about how Chewbacca's family celebrates Life Day. So, yeah, now you know how the holiday special fits into the canon. It's historical fanfiction. In-universe historical fanfiction. Alright. Okay, great. Off you go. Now, where was I? Custodian? Right. Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, custodian of the stolen planet that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. You know, I think those two Wills should fall in love and get married. It would be cute. Okay. We still got 18 minutes left, and nothing Empire Strikes Back related lying around, so we're going to have to improvise. And what do you know?
Yeah. Alright, let's start with this.
Alright, Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. Much funnier guys than us have covered this, but, you know, they're, well, obviously they're never going to listen to this, so why not? We Don't Do Weddings, The Band's Tale by Kathy Tyers. Jabba the Hutt's cavernous, smoky presence room stank of spilled intoxicants and sweaty body armor. Okay, presence room. Make sure to make a note of that if we ever make a fan-made map of Jabba's palace. Guards and henchmen, dancers and bounty hunters, humans and Jawas and weakways in Arcona lay where they toppled, crumbled under arches, or piled in semi-private cubicles, or sprawled in the open. The inner portcullis yawned open. Just another all-nighter at Jabba's palace. The portcullis bothers me. What if we want to leave in a hurry? But it keeps out the worst of the riffraff. Let me rephrase that. The worst of the riffraff. Let me rephrase that. The worst of the riffraff, Jabba himself paid us well. Crime lord, connoisseur, critic, his hairless, blotchy tail twitched in rhythm when we played. Not our rhythm, his. We are Figure and Dan in the modal notes, members in good standing of the Intergalactic Federation of Musicians. By the way, the Intergalactic Federation of Musicians, I'm fairly certain that never comes up again after this short story. And we are, or were, Jabba's full-time resident entertainers. I've never spotted his ears, but Jabba appreciates a good swing band. He also likes controlling credit and inflicting pain, and he finds either more therapeutic than our music. And huddled on the back of the stage, we put away our horns while Jabba's guests snored. My Fizz, you symphonic ridge brows would call it a Doranian Beshnikwell, but this is jizz. I am a child. I am sorry. I am an overgrown child playing pretend as an adult. Slips into a thin case in less time than it takes to roll an Imperial inspector and check his pockets for credit vouchers. We are Biff. Our high hairless craniums manifest a superior evolutionary level, and our mouth folds pucker into a splendid embouchure for wind instruments.
Wait a minute. If this is a band of Biff, and Figure and Dan's the leader of this band of Biff, does that make him a Biff Lord?
Okay, that's a good one. That's a very good one. We perceive sounds as precisely as other species perceive color. Our band's leader, Figrin Dan, was wearily swabbing his clue horn. There's a joke there, but you'd have to speak Mythian to get it. Okay, I think there's only one possible joke you can make there. And I don't want to go there. I've already laughed at Jizz. Oh, my. It's a longer double read than my fizz, richer in pastel harmonics, but not so sweet. Tadan and Ichabel were arguing over their fanfare cases. Nalan had started disconnecting the horn bells from his bandfill. And Tech, we look alike to non-Biff, but you might have picked out Tech by the glazed gleam in his eyes that slunked over his Omni box. Blaster chips from a midnight blaster skirmish littered the Omni's reception dish. The Omni chip Omni clips our peaks, attenuates the lows, reverbs, and amps the total sound. Playing it takes even a Biff's full genius. Tech hates Figrin. Figrin won the Omni last season in a Sabak game. Hey, Doik. Figrin's head glistens. It was going to be a typical Tatooine scorcher. Jabba's temp exchanger needed repair. I clenched down my fizz. My fizz. What? I had a short lip, as humans call it. I was in no mood for foolishness. Okay, lip cannot possibly be exclusively a human term. Do you know how many species in the Star Wars galaxy have lips? That's a rhetorical question, by the way. Time for a friendly hand of Sabak? I don't gamble, Figrin. Figrin brushed the sheen off his head with one knobby hand. You're thermal, Doik, and you're compulsive. All musicians are thermal. You're thermal for a musician. By the way, this doesn't stick, so it feels weird and out of place. This doesn't stick, so it feels weird and out of place. First up, there's a joke you can make there. Secondly, you're going to be hearing a lot of comments like that throughout this book. Who ever heard of a bander that didn't gamble? I'm the band's inside outsider, the straight man. I've carried that sweet little fizz through 6 systems. I peg it when it cracks and lube it when the keys click. I carve my own reeds, and I wasn't betting it on any Sabak match, not even to placate fiery Figrin Dan, a band leader who criticizes every missed note, owns everybody else's instruments, and isn't shy about giving orders. I don't gamble, Figrin, you know that. A smoky silhouette rolled in through the main arch. Figrin, I'm out. Turn around, slowly. The droid's waist, huge shoulders, and squared-off head had scalded my memory shortly after Jabba gave us our exclusive contract. His vintage E522 assassin. E522... I think there's official artwork of that droid. I'm going to have to look for it. E522 had saved my neck when one of Jabba's human sail barge tenders accused me of munching out of Jabba's private snack tank of live freckled toads. Luckily for me, E522 gave me an alibi. But I'd vowed never again to have more to do with humans than necessary. Racist. But Jabba's been hot to feed someone to the Rancor. Justice would have suggested throwing in my human accuser, but Jabba and Justice are not on speaking terms. They dropped E5. Literally smeared with meat juice. Juice through the Rancor's trapdoor in front of Jabba's throne. By the time Jabba's huge slavering mutants spat him out, he was beyond repair. Or so I thought. Was he back for revenge? He wore no restraining bolts. Rolling around a blaster-scarred column, he headed toward us. Frantically, I looked around. Nobody showed signs of waking up to rescue us. The droid raised his upper limbs. Both ended at elbow joints. Somebody disengaged his business parts, and that didn't leave him helpless. Assassin droids carry backup. Figrin Dan? He asked in a brassy green treble. What would you do if you found him? Figrin sidled closer to me, trying to sound colorless. Never carried a blaster. I wish I had one then, for all the good it would have done. Message delivery, honked the droid. Do not fear. My assassination programming has been erased, and as you can see, my weapons are gone. My new employer saved me from deconstruction by using me this way. He doesn't remember us, Figrin whispered in Mythian. His memory's been erased too. As I slowed my breathing, my long-standing attitude about assassin droids resurfaced. Never worry about one you can see. Unless that one is HK-47. Or IG-88.
Any assassin droid.
Yeah, if it has weapons, it's not harmless just because as you can see it. He hadn't fired before we spotted him, so we were safe. I've always gotten along better with droids than with most sapiens, particularly humans. But as for stripping E5 of his weapons, that would be like saving my life by cutting off all my fingers. Who's your new owner? I asked. The droid hissed, shushing me with white noise. I dropped my voice. Who? I repeated, sotto voice. The answer came softly. Mistress Valerian. Oh ho! Vals were friends. Jabba's chief rival in the spaceport town of Mos Eisley, a tusk-mouthed whippet recently arrived on Tatooine. Gambling, weapons running, information for sale, the usual. But she had thrived. And no wonder she sent a recycled envoy. Now that I processed the lack of immediate risk, I leaned back against the stage. What does she want? She wishes to hire your services for a wedding, to be held in Mos Eisley at her Lucky Despot Hotel. I had heard of the Lucky Despot. Figrin plucked his lip folds. Oh, we don't do weddings, we answered in unison. Please understand, a wedding gig wastes 2 days, 3 days of some species, plus the time it takes to learn new music. You're treated like a recording, told to repeat impossible phrases at length in the usual processional, and ordered to play a final chord as the nerve-wracked principals arrive center stage, if they arrive. Someone always brings a screaming neonate. Okay, you can use the word baby. You're not so sci-fi that you can't use that term. Then the reception, where they inebriate themselves until no one hears a note. All of this for half pay and full satisfaction. You've helped perpetuate a species. I mean, not everyone gets married and has kids. That's a very 90s... In order to have kids, that's a very 90s assumption of you. Kathy Tires. I'm too arrowy for this. E5 swiveled his flat head toward Figrin. Obviously, his recognition circuit still functions. Mistress Valerian has procured a maid from her homeworld, he declared. Good thing I wasn't drinking. I choked. The only thing uglier than a hut is a whippet. I tried to imagine another gargantuan Rankford yellow-tusked whippet arriving on Tatooine. I don't know, I've seen whippets, and they're really not that ugly. Valerian had probably promised luxury accommodations and good hunting. Wait till he saw Mos Eisley. The droid continued. This job is for their reception only. Mistress Valerian offers your band 3,000 credits. Transport and lodging provided, and unlimited meals and drinks during your stay. Also, 5 breaks during the reception. 3,000 credits? With my share, I could start my own band, live in the finest habitats. Please note that this does not mean that 3,000 credits is exactly how much it takes to find a band, to start one's own bands. Just that with that amount of money, you can start a band, okay? Look, exactly how much a credit is worth relative to real-life currencies is not consistent at all. It's kind of just vibes-based. I wish someone in charge of the expanded universe would finally address that, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe the franchise will be dead by that point. Who knows? Figrin hunched forward. Sabacc tables? He asked. Too late, I recovered from my great attack. Jabba had given us an exclusive contract. He wouldn't like our performing for Valerian, and when Jabba frowns, somebody dies. No, Figrin, I thought. Except while performing, certainly, the droid answered. I buzzed my mouthfuls for Figrin's attention, but his sublime vision didn't deal me in. Figrin set down his deck and commenced negotiating. We flew into Mos Eisley during first twilight, with one of the suns dipping behind a dull, murky horizon. Our cramped little transport skimmed through the decaying southern sector, chauffeured in by an orange service droid. He, like the former assassin, wore no restraining bolts, which predisposed me to like their owner. Sapient shadows slipped into darkening corridors as we drove past. The byword in Mos Eisley, which looks like a cluster of populated sand dunes, is camouflage. If nobody sees you, nobody shoots you, or testifies against you when what passes for local courts. 3 stories above one of Mos Eisley's nameless streets, Twin beacons blinked like ship lamps, and brilliant yellow beams glowed out of a wide open entry hatch. Sorry, we're gonna have a hard time finding stuff to talk about, because this is from the classic era of the EU, where a lot of the world building and lore wasn't fully established, and thus instead of referencing stuff, authors tended to just kind of do their own thing, and it was all horribly inconsistent and incoherent. Now it's horribly inconsistent and incoherent, but occasionally you catch a reference or two. So it's an improvement. At least I know. And brilliant yellow beams glowed out of a wide-open entry hatch. The droid maneuvered us closer. A long curving ramp and straight stairs swooped up from street level to the elevated main entry. Beneath the airway, I spotted the hotel's most notable feature: 3 large portholes. A group of investors crazy enough to sink their credits on Tatooine had towed a beat-up cargo hauler here and sunk a quarter of it under the sand. Debris blown in by a recent dust storm lay clumped along its wreckage, which had been starboard. Antenna cluster wreckage drooped over what must have been the cockpit. I mentally saluted the lucky despot with the spacer's traditional appraisal of somebody else's ship. What a piece of junk. Okay, I lied, there are some references. And also, F you, spacer's traditional appraisal. Luke made that up on the spot, and you know it. Our speeder settled at the front of the long ramp. "Disembark here, gentles," droned the droid. Oh, I get it. They can be gentlemen because they're not human. And we unloaded our gear from the... I would prefer gentle beans. We unloaded our gear from the Airbus's cargo compartment onto a repulsor cart. We had only brought one change of clothes and our performing outfits and left the rest of our belongings at Jabba's palace. Mos Eisley's odors, ship fuels, rancid food, low-tech industrial haze, and the sheer desensitizing smell of hot stand hung in sullen air. Once inside the lobby, we blinked while our eyes adjusted. An orange-suited human security guard slouched at one corner. Excuse me. No sign of Lady Val. Mentally, I recategorized her. She might trust droids, but she equated musicians with kitchen help. Hey, how dare you insult kitchen help like that? This way, our droid led us past an extremely attractive front desk person, species unknown to me, whose multifaceted eyes glistened prettily. You get it? Because both have different standards of attractiveness, because they don't look conventionally attractive by human standards. Moving on. A long, vast room filled a third of the ex-ship's top deck. Reflective black bulkheads and a shiny black floor enveloped several dozen sparsely populated tables, but more than one table tottered over damaged legs, and here and there white strips showed through the peeling black bulkhead. And here, the famous Star Chamber Cafe, we sat up and started a number to get the room's acoustics. Early diners clapped, clicked their claws, or snapped their mandibles. Satisfied, we repackaged our gear and grabbed an empty dinner table. Within minutes, the show began. A comet whizzed past Figurant's head. Constellations appeared beneath the ceiling and reflected in my soup. Holographic sabacc spreads flickered into existence over several tables. Now I remember the rest of what I'd heard. Jabba had made sure the despot never got her gambling license from local Imperial bribe meisters, so Valerian had to hide her gaming equipment under dark. Reportedly, Jabba warned Lady Val of planned police parades. For a price. Figurant rapidly pulled out his deck and wandered away. Tonight he would lose, on purpose. My other comrades joined the low-case Shaquille match. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that doesn't come up again. Like sabacc plenty of times, but never heard of Shaquille. I found a bored-looking Cubaz security guard and struck up conversation. Cubaz make excellent security staff. Their long prehensile noses discern scents, the way Biff distinguished pitch and timber, and Kubas's greenish-black bends into every shadow. The one good thing of these books being written in an era where the original trilogy was really the only thing to go on is that all of the species' names are recognizable. For me, at least. In exchange for my personal stats, which you probably knew anyway, and a mug of mildly intoxicating lum, I found out that the green-caped Kubas's name was Thwim, that he was born on Cubindi, and that Mistress Valerian's prospective bridegroom, Dewap, was an expert hunter, common enough profession on their homeworld. Dewap. Sounds like some kind. Sounds like a brand of whipped cream. Anyways, we'll give you some more tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina next time.